Hello everyone, thanks for coming outside with me today. Today I want to go over a checklist or a rundown of things that I'm going to do to your bow if you brought it to me in the shop and you were looking for a string and cable change, which is probably about 50 or 60% of the overall labor that we get into the shop. And then of course there's labor for crossbows as well and their own string and cable changes. And this is the highest price point on our labor. This is what we get the most money on in terms of how much work we have to put into it. Not because we're trying to price gouge you, but because it takes the most time. It doesn't take a whole lot to put a sight on, put a rest on, and get it level with center shot, but it does take a long time to get a pair of string cables on, get the D-loop set, get the peep height back to where it was supposed to be. And so I want to talk about all the little tips and tricks you're going to see and all the little intricacies that are involved when you take your bow into your local shop. And of course, there's going to be varying levels of competency at your local shop, as well as how long they're going to spend with your bow, what exactly they're going to break out in the tools, and exactly, my opinion, what tools, if you don't see them break out, just turn around and run the other direction and find a different shop, or at least show them this video and say, hey, can you check out these steps? So let's just pull the bow down here on the table and let's pretend that I'm bringing it to myself here for the very first time, what all I would be doing to get that bow ready to put back in your hands to hit back on the range. All right, so as a customer, you walk in, you set your bow down on the table, and there's one thing that people will ask me all the time: can you look this over? And that is arguably one of the worst things you could ask your bow technician to do. Predominantly because it's just like if you took your car to the shop, he has no idea what he's looking for. If you think there's an issue with it, tell us explicitly what you think there's something wrong with it. If you think there's a limb that's starting to delaminate, if you think that there's serving up here that runs through your cable slide or your roller guard, if you think a module screw is stripped out, just tell us. Or if you don't think anything's wrong with this, don't walk into your local shop and say, hey, look this over, because we have no idea what we're looking for. And if you want us to nitpick, you know, when you go to take your car to like a local, you know, kind of like your big brand store, like a Napa or a Pep Boys or something like that, they'll find nitpicky things. Oh, your windshield wiper needs replaced, or, you know, I think your spark plugs are going to be dirty. They'll nickel and dime you if you really want us to, and you want them to. But we don't want to do that. We want to do the work that needs to be done for the bow. And predominantly, a lot of folks, when they bring their bow to us, they have no idea really kind of what they're looking at. You know, as archery talk and YouTube lead you believe, there are not that many people out there, bow hunters in particular, crossbow hunters and vertical bow hunters alike, that really know what's going on with their bow, how to work on it, what the cam style is, what timing is, how to make sure your limbs are set properly. Even the basic stuff, a lot of people don't really understand. So when you bring us a bow and say, look this over, we know that you have no idea what you're talking about. Don't do that. Just take your bow in and say, I need this changed and I need this checked, so on and so forth. So let's say you were going to be looking over my shoulder. I got the time to do it while you're standing there. I'm going to do a string and cable change. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of paper and a pen, and as I'm going to start taking measurements of how the bow is currently set up. So this is an Elite Cure. It is fully set up to me, and we'll just pretend that my string cables need replaced here. The very first thing I'm going to do, if it were me in my home shop, and not at the actual shop where time is of the essence, if I have the ability, I will put this on the draw board and I will measure draw weight, draw length, let off, and make sure the cams are in time. If that is true, then I will leave the specs that I'm currently dealing with here on the bow exactly as they are. So what I'm talking about is we'll get a lot of people that will bring their bow in and say, hey, don't change anything, or hey, I really want it to be as close as possible because I just got my sight tape put together. Oh, good grief. That just makes me want to vomit into a bucket. You're bringing a string cable change. This is like bringing your car to your local dealer and saying, hey, I need 4 new tires, but I want it to handle exactly the same. I don't want any different feel for these 4 new tires compared to the 4 old ones. Well, that's just absolutely asinine. That's just impossible to do. And so if you have a single pin sight on here, I don't have a sight on this bow right now, but if I had a single pin sight on here and I tell my local shop, hey, I want to make sure my sight tape's exactly the same, good luck. Very, 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 very little chance that is going to come even close. Maybe you'll be within a couple yards, but your sight tape is going to change. And also, If your bow is wildly out of spec, so like I said, if it was here in my home shop, I would check for the timing, the poundage, and the draw length. At the local shop, I'm not going to do that because it's extra that I'm not really going to do. And like I said, most people don't know. They have no real idea what their bow poundage is. It might be maxed out at 60 pounds, but the strings and cables have stretched, so it's really peaking at 58. The draw length, therefore, might be shorter than, this is set at 30 and a half, so, it might actually be like 30 and a quarter, even close to 30. They have no idea. And I'm not going to take all that time, effort, and energy if I'm in the main shop because A, it's a waste of time, and B, people don't know. And I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence or anything, but if you don't know, you don't know. And that's just kind of the thing is, when you take your car, if you don't know, you don't know, and you leave it to the experts to figure it out for you. If you want, though, it to be exactly set up because you've checked at home, you've checked your own cam timing, you've checked your own axle to axle length, so on and so forth, and you want your local shop to do the exact same thing, then have that all written down on a piece of paper yourself and have that all done in advance. Hand that piece of paper and say, I want to make sure axle length is this, it's peaking at 61 pounds, the draw length is so and so. If you do that at home, you can get that level of detail if you put that effort and energy. This leads me to the number one tool. If you hand a bow to a bow technician and he does not pull out a measuring tape of some sort, just run for the hills, because this is like the most vital piece when it comes to setting up a bow for a customer, because regardless of rotating modules and everything else, the D-loop position, the peep height, measuring these string silencers, if they do, or these these brass silencers on these Wicked Thread custom strings, if they aren't in the exact same place, you see they're different distances here. This is everything you want for your bow tech to be working on. So the first thing I'm going to do, if I'm not doing those first three things that I listed, is I'm going to check axle to axle length at first, just to kind of make sure I'm in the rough ballpark. Usually get an 1/8, so the cure is 31 and 15/16, and we are right on that, 13/16, and we are right on there right now. And I'm measuring center of the axle to the center of the axle. And you get an 1/8 of inch of play either way, and that's true of basically 99% of manufacturers in the market. So I see axle to axle is good. That means I could make the inference that the poundage is going to be right around that peak weight, because I can see there's no gap here. So I know that I'm going to be shooting for this bow when it's all said and done to be at its peak weight of 60 pounds. It's amazing. If you lose that limb sticker on the inside, there's no way to look at a limb and say, oh yeah, it's 40 pounds, 50 pounds, 60 or 70. So the only way I can tell is by measuring the axle to axle length, making sure it's roughly in the ballpark, and then putting it on the drawboard and the scale to see what the poundage is. And that's basically it. And if you want to tell your bow shop, I want it at 55 pounds, 60 pounds, again, have it on that sheet of paper. But after I measure the axle to axle length, I'm then going to go ahead, regardless of where this D-loop is located, whether I put it on a previous set or another shop did, or even you did it at home. You'd be amazed at the amount of janky D-loops we get to see. I'm going to measure from the inside of this top knot. It doesn't matter where the bow technician measures it from, but I like to measure from the inside of the top knot. And if I have a kisser button here, I will measure to the center of the ring of the kisser button, and I will measure to the center of the hole or the bottom edge, something for the peep. And so I see that from the underside of the top knot to the bottom edge of my peep is 6 inches. Same thing, I will then go, if I have to reinstall these are stuck on here. Obviously they're brass and straight tubes, so I wouldn't have to redo these. I would have to order strings, but I see that they are 10 inches dead nuts to the center. And I will flip it and go again from the underside of the top knot, and I see it's 10 3/4 to the center of that string silencer, if you will, the brass speed knocks here on the bottom side. So that's important. Also, I will go and measure brace height, and brace height is measured, and if axle to axle is good, brace height is right on par there. And again, you get about an 1/8 inch of play depending on how far backed out the limb bolts are. Here we're just over 6.5 inches, which is right where we want to be for the cure. So all the specs check out, and I would write down those distances. If I had a kisser button on there, usually it's around that 1.5 to 2 inches away from the D-loop, and then also to the underside of the peep. Now I'm ready to put this bow into a press, remove the peep, remove the kisser if it's on there, and then I can start putting string cables back on. Also, if you are unknown, if it's an old bow and you have an unknown string and cable length because the sticker's gone, or it's just an ancient bow and no one really has the string specs for it. Again, the measuring tape is what he's going to want to pull out. He's probably going to have, if he does have it set up correctly, he would have a bench with 2 nails in it or something, allow him to pull. You're supposed to measure them under 100 pounds of tension. That's not always going to happen. So he would put the one loop of the string in one end and then pull it taut and get a rough estimation at a minimum for the actual string and cable length. And again, that's for an old bow. I mean, I'm talking 15, 20 years old at least, if not even to the 25 range. And yes, people are still bringing in bows that are 25 years old, even though technology is so good here with the modern era. So after we get the peep figured out, the distance to the kisser, then we're going to go ahead and install the new strings. Now, this bow is in immaculate condition because I really try to take care of my equipment if I can, but a lot of guys keep them under beds, keep them in garages, in their wood shop or whatever, and they're just covered in dust, dirt, debris, and grime, all up in the module screws and in the module tracks, the string tracks of the cams themselves, and that is bad news bears after a while. You'll start to get fibers down, particularly in the string here. You'll, in the bottom cam or the top cam where it hits trees and gets in the dirt if you hunt under ground blinds. If it's me in my home shop, when I take the string cables off, I'll take a Q-tip with a little bit of denatured alcohol and I'll run it through all of the tracks of the module, all the tracks of the cam, and really clean those out. If there's a whole bunch of interior holes here in the cam module, I'll clean those out as well. Also, if I see any rust on any nuts and bolts, I'll take Ballistol, which is basically used for leather and gun cleaning parts and so on and so forth. Really great product. And I will put that in a Q-tip as well, and I'll run that in all of the holes. Mostly the biggest rust issue is here in the main limb bolts. Those are going to be the biggest rust holes, but anywhere where I see there could be rust on module screws, rest and bolt screws, stuff like that, and I'll clean that off with the Ballistol, and that'll help seal the metal and also remove the surface rust that's on there. Not going to harm the bow in any way, shape, or form, but it just offers a cleaner, more professional look. If I'm in the shop though, and I'm trying to crank out several bows in a day, I'm not going to do that. I might, if it's real crummy, I'll clean out with a Q-tip and some denatured alcohol, but predominantly I'm just going to slap it on and maybe take a cloth and wipe off just the cosmetic dirt and grime. But if you have a bow technician that does that and goes and cleans out all your tracks and modules and adds Ballistol to your screws, he is a winner. Tip that man. He is, or woman, they know what they're doing, and they're definitely want to come back as a returning customer. So after I get the strings and cables or string and cables installed, I'll go ahead and I will use a T-square. Now, some shops will use a level. In some shops we use a T-square. I prefer a T-square. In my local shop I use levels because that's the leveling system we have with a bow vise. If you do not see your local shop pull out levels and a vise or a T-square to figure out where your D-loop goes, run for the hills. If he's just eyeballing it and putting it on in his lap, then he is insane. You want to have them use a T-square to line things up. I would use mine here to figure out the bottom placement of the burger holes as it applies to the D-loop here. If they don't do that, then, oh boy, I don't even know what they're doing. They desperately need to be doing that because that is going to help them with their rest height. That is going to help them with the D-loop height. And of course, then from the D-loop is where we measured our peep and kisser location as well. So if this is wonky, everything else is wonky after that. So if they don't use a level, or I prefer a T-square because you can use a T-square sideways. It doesn't matter. Levels have to be perfectly up and down. You need a bow vise. It's complicated. T-square, so easy a caveman could do it, if you will, and it just makes life a lot simpler. Also, and then coming back to the rest here, so again, if you installed the D-loop in, kind of your own wonky way or another shop did, your rest may or may not be to spec, meaning you might not be sitting dead level through the burger buttonholes. It might not be sitting well 13/16 for center shot, and that's basically every manufacturer on the planet. 13/16 is the center shot recommendation. We're going to set that back to spec. And again, this goes back to the make sure it's same as my sight tape. We're going to set that back to spec because that is a safe thing to do. That is the safest way to shoot the bow, and it's also the most efficient way to shoot the bow, and you can tune from there later. 13/16 center shot, and I even have my T-square even marked here with 13/16 in Sharpie here on the one side. So when I put this into the burger holes on the riser and I measure out, the center of the arrow should be basically dead nuts on that Sharpie line of 13/16 of an inch. If they're not doing that, your local shop, then they're doing you a disservice. If they're letting it be an inch out or half inch in or something like that, you'll pull your hair out in the tuning process later, and obviously we don't want that. Make sure they're using a level, make sure they're using a T-square and getting the appropriate center shot distance. And of course, if they're using the levels, they're gonna have to break out a measuring tape in order to get that. Once I got the peep in there, I've got my kisser back on, I've got the D-loop back on for the customer. I'm now gonna put this bow in the draw board and I'm gonna check cam timing. And I want to make sure, because at the beginning I checked cam timing to see if it was on or not. You'll be amazed the number of people that bring in a bow that is a mile out of time. And when it's a mile out of time, it's going to sound different, it's going to feel different, the draw cycle is going to be different. We're going to put this bow back into spec and we're going to make sure that it is in time. Once the bow is in time by either adding or subtracting twists to the cables, I'm now going to work on making sure the peep comes back straight. Now, if it's just in the shop that I work at, I'm just going to draw it on the draw board a whole bunch of times and work with the twists of the string to ensure this comes back straight. Again, that's going to shorten or lengthen draw length very minutely, and like I said, 90+% of people would never notice. But that's something I'm going to play with to get this back straight. If it is a great shop that you go to and they have the time of day to do this, or even better yet, you're at, like at my shop here in my basement, I will let you shoot this a whole bunch of times to see if there's going to get any bundles of the string that are going to stretch. These Wicked Thread custom strings are phenomenal from Craig here in Dillsburg, PA. I've never had peep twist out of the 2 sets that I have from him so far. Been incredibly impressed, and I put these things through the absolute ringer. This is the new Bloodline fiber, the VEC 99, and it has done a fantastic job of holding the bundles together. When I say the bundles, and this is something that, of course, string manufacturers don't need to worry about, and mostly bow shops don't either, but when a bundle of colors, so this is a green and a black, maybe the green will settle the bundle faster than the black or vice versa, and it'll cause the green to stretch more, and it'll twist one way or another with the peep, and that will be a hair-pulling experience. So if I'm here in my own house and I'm working on somebody's bow, I'll let them shoot this bow. I'll have everything set up. We'll get the peep and kisser in the location, and we'll have them shoot, 5-6 feet away. It doesn't have to be anything amazing, and get 20, 30, 40 shots out of the bow. And that'll allow that string to twist appropriately and see if any bundles need to settle. And then after that, the string won't hopefully move anymore and you won't get any peep twist. We'll get a lot of people that'll bring a bow in, and particularly the older single cam bows, like the older Matthews. And it's just a fault of single cam bows, not a Matthews fault. But those strings are so daggum long, they're in the 80s to hundreds of inches long, and when you put one twist in, it might take 20 or 30 shots for that big twist to move all the way around through the entire 80 to 100 inches of the string. And so you'll set everything, and then the guy will take it home, he'll shoot 30, 40 arrows, and then his peep just goes whack, and then he calls us up, well, my peep twisted, you guys are terrible. And we're like, well, welcome to working on archery equipment. So this is something that, like I said, if I'm in my own home shop and I'm working for somebody, I will let them do that. If I'm at the shop by myself though, or at the shop that I work at, I'm just going to hand you the bow and say good luck. And if you want, you could take it downstairs to the range, shoot it, and make sure it doesn't twist. Bowstrings are getting better. Companies are getting better at making bowstrings that don't do that, but just something to keep an eye on. After that, it's pretty much done. Now, when it comes to the tuning and the paper tuning and bare shaft tuning and everything, basically let that be your own thing. And particularly right now in today's day and age, everybody wants to be fickle and work on their own stuff and baby their bow and take care of that tuning and try different methods. That's not your local shop's problem. That's like asking your local Pep Boys to put a lift kit on your vehicle. That's not Pep Boys' job. That's your local custom builder's job. We're basically the Pep Boys, if you will, of the archery world. Our job is to get you 99% of the way there, and 100% definitely in terms of functionality. When it comes to doing all the fancy bells and whistles, the paper tuning, whatnot, we will help you as much as we definitely can, but we're not going to spend hours doing that. Now, in terms of what you should prepare for next time, and this is something that I really try to harp with people as someone who's works on bows in my home shop, works on bows, as a part-time living, and also just, works in and around the industry as much as I possibly can. Number one thing is that customers feel like they don't need to be prepared. They kind of treat their bow like they would treat a car, and that they could just show up and the part will be gotten for them, and so on and so forth. When it comes to particular things like strings and cables, I strongly recommend that you have a spare set on hand at all times, regardless of what manufacturer you want to go with. If you want to go with a stock manufacturer for Elite, that's winner's choice. If you want a custom set, like I said, I use Craig Herzog's Wicked Thread Custom Strings based out here of Dillsburg, PA. Whatever you want to do and whomever you want to buy them from, I strongly recommend having a backup set on hand. That'll keep your local shop, and particularly if you have an older style bow and the string cable lengths, like we mentioned earlier, might not be readily available, or if you kind of have an odd bow or a bow that your local shop doesn't deal with. For example, if my local shop doesn't deal Elite, I would probably want to keep my Elite string and cable specs on hand, have them written down on that sheet of paper I mentioned earlier, or even better yet, just already have the string and cables for them. That way, if I nick a string or a cable in the middle of the season, I can take the whole kit and caboodle in, hand them the whole package, and say, here you go. You don't have to buy anything extra. There's no wait time for shipping. There's no wait time for building, and you can just have it done. And particularly today, in today's day and age with COVID and the manufacturing problems that a lot of businesses and companies are experiencing, just having that right now with kind of the uncertainty of when it's going to get back to normal, it'd be a great idea to have all of those parts and pieces. The extra parts for your rest, like the extra string cord if you shoot, whether it's a cable activated or a limb driver like this Hamskea here, having an extra peep on hand in case this one just flies out and you use a special kind of peep. Whatever it may be, make sure you have it and you have it readily available. In today's day and age in particular, it just makes life a lot simpler for you and for your local shop. All right, so that's all for this video, and I'm sorry it was a lot of information in a very short amount of time, and if I left you with questions or things that I omitted that I should have added in the first place, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and send me an email, message me on any of those platforms, or for the greater YouTube public, leave a comment down below of things that your local shop does that I missed, that maybe even I should add to my own repertoire, or things that you don't think are necessary that maybe I should omit to save time. Whatever it may be, put those down so everybody can see them, comment. I love learning new things and seeing the experiences of other people with their local shops from around the globe. Hope you're able to get outside, enjoy the sport of archery hunting if you so choose. Definitely enjoy God's beautiful creation. I really hope it's warmer where you are than it is where I'm at right now, and we'll get to see you next time.